amongst many other sporting activities, Brandon has taken up running, and we thought this would be an interesting way because one of my bucket list things was to run a marathon down in Disney World, which probably won't happen the older I get. But we thought maybe this would be a good time to share some of the ways that Brandon does prepare for running. You want to do an intro to that? I have some questions here I want to ask you, but
I mean, yeah, I'll just kind of say that I was looking for something to kind of change up kind of the daily routine, and that's kind of where I kind of just started running from. And I'll let you kind of ask away with some questions and see if I can give you some good insight.
Okay, I will do that. Just gonna bring up your little there. Oh, yeah. Okay, you're one of those guys, I guess. You can feel which one.
Looks like the blue hair might fit me pretty well there.
That's right, I know. Okay, first of all, why did you get into running?
Yeah, so kind of as you mentioned, I've played plenty of sports and been around numerous different types of sports, and was kind of more or less looking for a mental challenge, something that would challenge me mentally. And thinking as I was getting older, sports, you have a lot more risk of injury as you kind of start to get older, and that's something that I was trying to prevent and avoid. And I figured running would be a good mental challenge, as well as something that potentially I wouldn't have to really worry about, spraining an ankle like in basketball, or, any shoulder surgery in baseball, or anything like that. So I figured, running would be something that I absolutely despised, and I would only run if it were in a sport. And so I figured it'd be a good self-challenge, and that's kind of where it started.
Okay, because you've been doing it quite a bit lately. I mean, it used to be maybe once or twice a week, right? But how often do you do it?
Yeah, so it's become almost an everyday habit, actually. And so I would say probably at least 6 times a week. Now the length could be from 4 miles to 12 or 13. It kind of depends. I haven't quite jumped past really a half marathon yet. That's kind of something I'm thinking about doing. But yeah, so it's probably about 6 times on average a week. So I didn't run today as we're doing this. So I guess that's my one day off.
Okay, now let's look a little bit of a timeline here. You did a couple of races past weekend, right? One was actually a virtual race, and another one was on a course.
Yes. So last Saturday was a 5K that was on a course in Londonderry. And yeah, so that was an Earth Day run, and then on Sunday I ended up running a virtual half marathon. Yes.
Okay, so what's the distance on those 2 races?
Yeah, so the 5K is 3.2, and then 3.2 miles, and then the half marathon is 13.1 miles. So a big difference. And the 5K is more or less known as kind of like a sprinter's race, where it's a lot of pretty much going all out for the full 3.2, and then the half marathon is, well, for me, was kind of saving myself a little bit till towards the end. And then you do have some people that can kind of sprint their way through a half marathon, but.
So you've worked your way now up to a half marathon, which I imagine that's how you do it step by step. And is your ultimate goal, you said, is to do a marathon at some point?
Yeah, it's funny. I never would have said that. If you were to ask me a year or 2 ago if I would ever run a full marathon, I would say no, no chance. I'd say you're crazy. But that is the ultimate goal, actually. Yeah, I would love to just, I guess, have that notch on the belt to say that I've ran a full marathon, as well as the training aspect of it as well too. Having that full marathon kind of push me to train, and that's another reason why I got into it. It was knowing that I would have to train to run in these long distance races, and kind of forcing me to essentially to train to get out there and run.
Danny says for him, a 4K is a marathon. Dan, I agree with you 100%. I tell my family my goal 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, bucket list was to run the Disney Marathon because I thought just the eye candy alone would keep me going. But older I get, the least that'll be out of my range. Maybe I'll be able to film Brandon or some other family members doing the Disney Marathon at some point while I'm eating my little slushy there on the side.
You know, it's never too late. Actually, I was looking at some of the individuals in the half marathon that did it virtually, and that, you know, there was upwards to like 70 years old individuals that are 70 years old that were completing half marathons. So it's never too late for you.
No, I know that in theory.
Yeah,
in theory, you're right.
That's right.
So okay, so you started running. It was just whatever around the neighborhood, just start running. Now, do you have a certain? We're talking timeline here. We know your timeline is working towards a marathon. How do you prepare for it? Do you try and get a certain miles every time you run, certain miles per week?
Yeah,
stop there.
Yeah. So I guess there's kind of two school of thoughts now. You know, luckily I have a friend who is a cross country coach at a high school, and so he kind of has helped me kind of with the training process. But essentially, it's the anytime that you're really training, especially for a longer distance, it's essentially just doing it. And so, for instance, so the half marathon, I was anticipating for it to take between an hour and a half to 2 hours. And so it's just going out and running for 2 hours straight. And that was kind of like the training aspect. And it didn't really matter the time. It was just building up your body's efficiency, right, in order to do so. And so that's pretty much the training aspect, is just doing it. Whether that means you're running, you know, 9-minute miles, or if you're running 7:30 miles, just getting out there and running essentially the time that you would think that it would take. Now, this is also kind of a training for somebody who has never done it before. You get somebody who's an Olympic, or, you know, somebody that's trying to win the Boston Marathon. It's going to be the training's going to be a little different for sure.
Right.
But so my thought process is, anytime that I'm going out and running, it's more or less trying to just build my body's efficiency, and however that means. So, for instance, I didn't really train for the 5K at all, but there'd be some days where I'd try to run, you know, 6-minute miles for 3.2, just to try to just train for that higher speed. Now, that's completely different than doing the half marathon. When doing the half marathon, it's just, you know, trying to make sure that I don't burn myself out halfway through, and I still am able to, you know, finish pretty strong.
Okay, now you've said basically the way you're prepping is by running. Is there, like in other sports, do you do any kind of exercise or any kind of drills at home just to prepare your body, or is it just running?
Yeah, so it's for me, it's more nutrition based. So, you know, making sure that I'm getting everything that my body needs, nutrition wise and nutrient wise, and then staying fully hydrated, and that's throughout the day, even the days that I'm not running, and then pliability and flexibility. So, you know, trying to injury prevention, and, you know, trying to make sure that stretching before as well as after, which I got to be honest, the after stretch for me is something that I tend to skip out on once in a while. And I think that's kind of caught up to me, with some muscle soreness and whatnot. But yeah, so nothing, you know, when you have a specific sport, you're more or less, you know, doing different skills in that sport. For running, essentially you're running, and there's no real other skills that you're really working on.
Okay, you gave me a perfect segue to my next question. Okay, we know how you prep basically when you're running, but what about have you changed your diet? Do you eat certain things on race day that you don't do on a day you're not racing, or, you know, how do you handle your food intake now?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, you know, I think there's a lot of different school of thoughts on nutrition. For me, I'm a big advocate of, you know, plant-based and really staying away from animal products. And so I haven't really changed that up too much. That's kind of been a belief for a while, even kind of before I started really getting into running. But for more or less race days, that day before, you're trying to get a little more of a carb intake, and so you're able to have that energy throughout the race, especially before a half marathon, and definitely if I were to or hopefully when I do a full marathon, definitely more of a carb intake on the day before. That way your body's then producing it, or essentially converting it to energy, and you'll have that, be able to withstand that energy throughout the whether it's 2 hours or 4 hours, whatever, however long you're running for.
And you're saying the day before, you always see people preparing. They have that big spaghetti dinner the day before. So
Yep.
is a certain amount of hours before a race? If it's a nighttime race, are you eating that stuff earlier in the day, or is there what's the gap there?
So normally, I mean, the kind of the rule of thumb is essentially, like they say, like 12 to potentially 18 hours before the race takes off.
Okay.
And that way it gives your body time to convert it to energy, and then it stores that energy, and that energy is still stored. If you do it, 24 to like 30 hours before that, you have a chance of risking that your body then that energy actually that it's stored then starts to turn to fat. And so you have there's a little bit of a gap there, but you never want to carb overload 4 or 5 hours before, because your body just doesn't have enough time to digest it and then convert it to sugars, which then go to energy. But,
So basically 12 to 15 hours is your meal, and nothing probably other than water. What do you have in the before?
Well, so I mean, now this is, I'm no Olympic runner by any means, and so they're probably a little different. But so I'll still do a little bit of whatever, banana, some sort of fruit before the race. So before my half marathon, I ended up actually doing, but I did a banana, and I believe I did a small English muffin. And so there's a little bit of carbs there, obviously. So I can't speak for somebody that's, Olympic runner or whatnot. My guess is they're probably a lot more strict with what they're putting in their body. And it probably could be just water.
So you consider running, now that you're doing it, a lifestyle change?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. So I would say that it's one of the toughest things that I've done, although it seems like it's becoming pretty easy now. But it's also something that I feel like I need to do almost every day. And so even if it's cold, it's snowing, it's raining, I mean, how the winters are, it's something that I still feel like I need to get out there and go do. And so I feel like it is a big lifestyle change.
Did you run through the winter? We have quite the winters up here in New England.
Yes. Yeah. So for the most part, I did. Now, I also, coach a varsity basketball team. And so that takes a lot of my time as well too. But any free time that I would have, I would make sure that I got a run in. So I would say my running dips down a little bit in the winter, not because of the winter, just because of time commitment. But if that time commitment wasn't there, I'd be running every day. Yeah.
Welcome in, Eric B. Thank you for joining us. We're talking about Brandon's process for preparing for running right now. Okay, so now that you've basically got yourself on a timeline, you know what you want to do. You're going from smaller races to half marathons to potentially a marathon. We've gone through your eating habits, your stretching technique, and going out and running. So if you were to share with me now, what are the positives and negatives since you began running?
Yeah. So I would, I guess there's a lot more positives that kind of take place than negatives. I'd say if I were to go negatives, one negative potentially might be some nagging injuries. Obviously running takes a little bit of toll on your joints and muscles and whatnot. I've been kind of battling, I think, a stress fracture in my foot. I haven't got it looked at yet,
Really?
but it's it's just something that just kind of nags. It's nothing that's like super crazy painful, but it just like it's there. And then It kind of pops up here and there. Some days it's fine. Some days it's got a little bit of pain in it. That's really the only negative. I guess the only other thing is like you have to have time to run, and especially if you go run a mile, a lot of people can run a mile in 8 or 9 minutes, so it doesn't really take that much time. Some people are even less than that, obviously. But if you're really trying to train, for instance, I didn't fully train too hard for the half marathon that I ran, but the days that I were training, if I'm running for an hour and a half, that's taking an hour and a half out of your day. So I would say that, I mean, you could look at that as a positive or a negative. And the positives are just, I mean, I don't even know where to begin with the positives. First is, the fact that you're completely accomplishing a task, whether it's a 5K or it's 5 miles, or anytime that you're running, you accomplish that task, and builds that self-esteem, as well as the runner's high feeling is completely real. Anytime that I really finish a run, I feel like that I'm kind of on not cloud nine, but I just feel really good.
Right.
And I feel like it's like the euphoria and the endorphins that are being secreted in the brain, and it's completely scientifically proven. And then as well as just the mental aspect of it. Not even to mention like the physical aspect of, obviously, potentially weight reduction, you're toning your body, strengthening your muscles, especially in your lower half. But just the mental aspect of it, where it's been proven to help with depression or any stress or anxiety. Right. And these are things that I don't really suffer from, but I also don't think I suffer from them because I'm so physically active and running and everything. So I would say the positives are a lot, a lot more than the negatives, really.
I should have mentioned at the beginning, if anyone does have any questions on preparation or anything to do with racing for Brandon, just throw them in the chat here.
Yeah, please do. I'd love to answer them.
Same thing. My biggest problem when I would go out is just, I can't do it alone. You got to be willing to just go out and take the time to go. I need someone there to talk to, something like that. So I guess that's hard to get over that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with that. It's so much easier to run with somebody else. And it's funny. And kind of, I think was it Jeff or somebody that said that their 5K feels like a marathon.
That was Danny.
Okay, Danny. Yeah. So, it's funny anytime that I'm running alone, I run for, 4, 5, 6 miles. And that feels like I've ran for like a half marathon, because it just feels like it's so long. However, if I'm with somebody, those 13 miles that I run for, it feels literally like 5 miles, just because there's communication. Yeah. So I agree. I must say though, I do enjoy running alone sometimes, just because you can just kind of let your mind go, and wherever. And a lot of people ask me, like, what do you think of? And what are your thoughts when you're running? I don't even really like force it to go anywhere. It just, I let my mind go wherever it is, whether it's like the day, the weather, wherever I'm running, the houses, what's going on around me. I just let my mind kind of just wander while I'm running.
See, that's why I need eye candy. It's weird. I just can't do it. Like Jeffrey says here, he says, I like to do a lot of walking. That's me, the walker. So,
yeah.
So now, does your wife run with you at all? Or is this something you do yourself?
She doesn't really participate running. She has a few times. She's kind of more like Jeffrey, more of the walking type as well too. And so, we do go out on walks, but she kind of lets me do the running for sure.
So that's your own thing, basically.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I would love for her to partake and potentially get into it, and so maybe that's in the future.
Maybe sometimes she'll follow the good example you set.
Yeah, we can only hope so.
That's right.
Yeah.
Welcome in Hughes Studios. Thank you for joining us. We're talking about racing right now with Brandon. Okay, so anything else before we move on to the next quarter that you'd like to share or tell people about going out and getting off the chair or the recliner and going out and running?
I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's, it's it's your choice, or if you're going to get out there and go. I'll say this: I never thought that I would turn into kind of an everyday runner, and I never really thought that running would be for me. And so I think everybody should give it a try, and just kind of see what happens. And there's so much that running has to offer, and I definitely think that it's worth giving it a whirl for sure.
Sounds good, Brandon. Thank you for sharing all that
Yeah.
with us.